warm welcome everyone to the today's Fireside session. I'm happy to introduce my guest here today, Morten Henneveld.
Thank you very much.
Who is CEO of OssDsign, who will discuss what's happening in the company and in the market with us this morning. But maybe we should start with the. I mean, you've gone through a major transition, and you started the year now focusing purely on the orthobiologics business in the US. And so, how is the transition going for you as a company? And you're building up your presence in the US now and moving out from Sweden. And so
absolutely. No, it has been a major transition. You know, from the not only the beginning of the year, but at least when I came in 2020, for the first 10 years, many may know OssDsign as a cranial patient-specific implant company. Of course, that significantly changed as we entered the orthobiologics business in 21. And as we announced, we would start the year purely as a orthobiologics focused company.
Yeah.
And that has all gone to plan. So cranial has been shut down. All the cost related to that closure was booked in our Q4 report. So we kind of start the year with a clean slate, and you know the sun is shining. So it feels really good.
So now you're building up your office in the US, and what will it look like? I mean, what type of personnel are you looking for, and how is that all working out for you?
Yeah, no, but as we said when we announced a new strategy back in September, there are a number of things that really we should have done a while ago on the orthobiologics business that we couldn't do for time reasons or cost constraints, as long as we had cranial. So now, when we don't have that, we are re-injecting the savings that we're getting from the cranial business into the orthobiologics business, and that's really around 4 areas. We are building a stronger sales and marketing presence in the US. We are heavily accelerating our R&D efforts. We will continue the clinical programs. Of course, we will keep looking at doing more studies of that nature. And then we have to make sure that our production process is also scalable to a 10-15x.
Yep.
Right now, we're in a really good place. We have built good safety stock, but we also have to make sure we have high expectations in the business, as you know, that it can cater for that.
Yep.
So that's kind of the strategic part. But then, of course, as part of the change, we are moving a number of functions out of Sweden and into the US. And those positions we are recruiting as we speak. So yes, we will have a fairly minimal presence in Sweden and a much larger presence in the US.
Yeah. Excellent. And on the clinical side, I mean, you have the PROPEL registry going. What else would you be? What are your plans here for further research?
I think there are many things. Right now we have top fusion that technically has to be followed up to 24 months. But of course we already hit the primary endpoint. We are continue to enroll patients into PROPEL. It's a little bit hard to tell exactly when we'll be able to publish, right? Yeah. Because we now have 100 patients that have come up to 1 year, and they have a 120-day window for their follow-up. But in order to publish let's say, a statistically significant paper, you need to have a homogeneous cohort that is big enough for that. And that we really can't predict, because it's not like we have a protocol with inclusion and exclusion criteria. This is a broad read of everyone in the US. Yeah. So we constantly look at the data and see when we reach that point. But there are so many opportunities for us to publish. It's extremely valuable data that we are building right now. In addition to that, of course, we are working with surgeons on investigator-led studies, and we are also already thinking about, could there be a next bigger study that we need to pursue down the line. That, of course, has some cost implications, so that's something you need to think carefully about.
And so you will not be able to give any timeline when we could expect to see some results from the propel?
No, I think what we've said is that we are going to see things coming out during 2024.
Yeah.
As I said, we do have a significant amount, which means that we can also now demonstrate to surgeons that we've done virtually every case you can imagine. And though some of those case reports, of course, will be published, so we can talk about it. Exactly when we get to the point where we have a larger publication is hard to tell. Yep. We are hoping that we get there by the end of this year.
Yep. And you obviously you aim to show that you have a superior fusion rate, I suppose, than what's available today.
I mean, there are many things. I think fusion rate, of course, that is the primary kind of endpoint that everyone looking at. But if you take our top fusion result that we just published, it actually had a number of important data points. One was, of course, the 93% fusion rate. Yep. Right? It's not statistically significant. It's a small cohort. But what I think was even more interesting, actually, to me, is that if you look at the fusion rate, because the beauty with a first in patient study is really that there are very regular follow-up at 3, at 6, at 12 months. And if you look at the 3-month follow-up, you will see that every single patient is either showing a full fusion already. We had 4 of those already at 3 months, but the rest were all of them were showing partial. So it means that we are able to grow bone exceptionally fast. Mm-hmm. And that is a 100% confirmation of what we actually saw in the preclinical, which is the point of a first in patient study. So there are other data points. Then of course it's very important that all parameters for quality of life, pain scores, they were all positive, and there were no adverse events in the study, right?
No infections.
So I think it's important, of course, to look at the fusion rate, but there are a lot more than that. And I think the speed of bone formation with which we're showing is unique. Yeah. It is exceptionally fast, and we already saw that in the preclinical study.
That's good. Excellent. You ended the year at a phenomenal sort of momentum in terms of sales development, and now we're a few months into the new year. How has the sales momentum continued?
Well, it's good. We almost have we're 2/3 into the quarter. Yeah. No, listen, as we said when we also published our Q4 results in the beginning of February, we're seeing a constant momentum, and we're seeing that run rate just increasing, right? And it is just a mathematical equation. We keep building more and more hospital approvals. We are, getting close to 100 now. We're seeing the customer base growing, the number of users growing, and we're also seeing, gradually we're moving surgeons to slightly higher adoption levels all the time. And the mathematical effect on sales of that is just that it keeps growing, and we finish every quarter with a higher run rate than we came in with. And as long as we do that, I'm happy, right? Because that means that we will show significant growth for a very foreseeable future.
But there were you highlighted some large orders during Q4. So maybe that will distort the transition into Q1, or is
that I mean, clearly it will distort the comparison, right? Which is also why we highlighted it. Because the underlying run rate was lower than actually the reported number because of these. So, this was an extraordinary situation with a hospital moving in entire operating theater and completely changing their order pattern and their patient flow during a quarter. So that's also why we felt we had to disclose it, because it wasn't the normal run rate. It was extraordinary.
We'll see. I guess we'll have to wait until May.
We'll have to wait a little bit, but they're not the only ones buying. Luckily, right? We keep building, and we've been extremely successful in actually building access, right? So as we also disclosed, we're getting close to 100 VAC approvals. This is only our estimate, but they represent a potential of around $50 million in sales just in synthetic bone graft.
Yeah.
Then you can add another 80 million that we think they're spending on another biologics product, right?
Yeah.
So we already have access to a very, very serious potential, but I think the point is, this is about, 7, 8, 9% of the market, right, give or take.
Yeah.
So there is still an enormous market out there that we are not even touching yet, right?
Yeah.
But of course that we will in the future. So I think that's the way to think about it. We've come an exceptional long way in 2 years, and yet you can argue that we only just still scratching the surface.
But in those 88, do you have a feeling for what type of penetration you have in those? I mean, there are a number of surgeons in each department at each hospital, and some of these hospital, the 88 you had, I suppose they have several satellites. Yeah. So it could be, hundreds of surgeons at each.
Yeah, and that's also how, I mean, we run the company meticulously with some sales excellence metrics, right? We look very much at the access KPIs, at the adoption KPIs, and our coverage KPIs, and we spend a lot of time tracking that. Of course, when it comes to adoption, it can be very difficult to do on a hospital level because there are multiple surgeons, and maybe you have 20% of someone's business and 50% of someone else's, but 0 on 2 other surgeons, right? So we tend to do it on a surgeon level, actually look at, we roughly know how many procedures they're doing, and therefore we can estimate and at least approximately how much bone graft they should be using in a year. And then we can kind of guesstimate. And we have everything. We have surgeons where I would say we're close to 100%. We also have surgeons where we are used occasionally for some special cases where they think our bone graft works really well. But there is an enormous opportunity because, of course, we are not at a fair share across all our users today, right? So 24 is very different than 23. 23 was all about getting approvals and access in the market and building the user base. 24 is also still about that, of course, that doesn't stop. But now we have an installed base of users, which means that we will start to engage a lot more with surgeons in peer-to-peer and other type of these kind of things. Because at the end of the day, the best advocate for ambassador for the product is the one who uses it clinically in the OR. Exactly. And that is the surgeon. So priorities are slightly changing in the sense that this year will also be a lot around the adoption and around actually using and leveraging that user base that we've already installed to talk about the product, of course, to their peers.
No, I mean, it sounds reasonable. I assume at some point in time when a number of surgeons use it in a clinic and the ones who don't use it, when they keep hearing about the success, they will be intrigued to try.
That's at least what we're hoping, right? Of course, surgeons inevitably will always have
reasonable.
Have preferences, right? As we've also talked about, this is an exceptional crowded market, but one of the reasons is certainly that you still have products that were launched 20 years ago. Many of the orthopedic giants, their offerings are 10, 15 plus years old, right? And you have many other of these type of products, and there are still surgeons using them because they've done it for many years and they know how they react and they know what to work with, right? And sometimes just knowing what you work with is nice for some surgeons, right? Yeah. And then of course you have an increasing amount of surgeons that are now moving away from maybe using autografts of the patient's own bone or even allograft because of all the disease transmission cases that have been into synthetics, because synthetics is just today showing better efficacy, and it's also showing a very different or much better safety profile than allograft. And we are also seeing surgeons, I would say, because it's absolutely common knowledge that the latest technologies are performing much better than the early technologies. So you are also seeing surgeon shifting that. And combined with the fact that the population is aging, the plus 60 age group is significantly increasing. It's set to double over the next 30 years. And the need for spinal procedures is driven by spinal degeneration, which is caused by aging typically. So we are actually in a really good sweet spot in the market where we will be getting tailwind from these things.
Yeah, and you mentioned that the new products that are becoming available, they have a higher fusion rate. How is your 93% compared to other recent clinical trials?
You know, it still, as I said, it's not statistically significant, but it's way beyond that, right?
Yeah.
93% is typically something that you only see when you talk about the neck, so in ACDF cases in cervical. If you look at the spine average, I would say they're typically around 80, maybe a little bit lower, sometimes down to 75.
Those are the numbers I keep hearing.
Exactly, right. So. And that is interesting because you have technically you have 1.5 million different spinal procedures, but about half of that, 750,000, are fusion procedures where you need a bone graft. And that roughly means that you have 150,000 of revision surgeries each and every year, which is an enormous amount of revision surgeries.
Yeah. And how soon after the initial, is that taking place like a year after, or how is the timeline for a revision?
I mean, it depends what it is. You know, some of the common reasons are, you know, implant loosening, infection, swelling, those kind of things. They tend to happen fairly fast, actually, after the surgery.
3 to 6 months,
or maybe even sooner than that. And this is also why I think it's so interesting to see how fast we are growing bone, because fast bone growth we know has a direct correlation to reduction in complication rates. So if you grow bone fast, the chance that you're going to have implants loosening, so the metal wear goes down. If you grow bone fast and you close all the voids, then you're not likely to have an infection, right? So the speed with which you are actually driving the bone formation, I think, is as important as where you are at a 12-month time point.
Have the sort of the companies selling metals and screws, and have they reached out and said, can we collaborate with you and package, we sell the plates and you provide the orthobiologics?
Well, I get the question a lot these days. 6 days after we acquired Syracuse, I got the first call. Right?
Okay.
And of course, people are noticing us in that sense. I think the point is, which I think many may not understand, that yes, of course, you have the orthopedic giants in this field who have a lot of offering, right? But they have historically been implant companies. Yep. Today, they are more about robotics and navigation and enabling technologies, which basically means that if you look at them and their offering in the market, they have not brought any innovation to market for, as I said, 10, 15 years. So it's not that important to them. So of course, naturally, what you see generally in the industry, spine or orthobiologics are the two ranking highest when it comes to M&A activity generally. And that is simply because many of the larger companies, they're buying the innovation as opposed to do it themselves.
Yeah. It makes sense. Makes sense. So your financial target that was set out late last year, or during the fall. How are you gonna reach those targets, and what I mean? Let's discuss them. 150.
I would say honestly, million. Do what we do now.
Right?
If we do what we do now and we continue to do that, then we'll get there. And then you need a bit of luck and all the other things, right? But I think essentially, we already early on, when we started commercializing, said we are building for the future, right? Which means that we are also investing in clinical. So we need to keep broadening out. We need to come with new products. That takes a few years. And we need to prove the evidence on our products. And then we'll get there.
Sounds good. Thank you very much for
joining
us here today at ABG, and wish you all the best of luck in the future.
Same to you. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you.